Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Traditionally, this is how the story goes. Boy meets girl, boy gets married to girl, and then baby makes three. But there is a growing trend with couples deciding not to have children. It may be an economic decision, it may be a very deeply personal one. Have a listen to this.
I'm child-free and loving every moment of it.
I'm about to be 73. As I look back on this choice, I have no regrets. This lifestyle has been and continues to be a joy.
Family means different things to different people. It's all about choice, and this is mine.
Today on the stream, we'll discuss that decision to be child-free and the impact it might have.
I'm Jeremy Morley. I'm an international family lawyer in New York. I handle international family law cases around the world, and I am in the stream.
It seems that everybody has a take on this because everybody was born. Yeah. Everybody's in some kind of family somewhere in the world. Omar, what do you have for us?
You know, like any life choice, you expect people to either agree or not agree. But in this case, I'm really flabbergasted by how strong people's opinions are on this. We have people who are tweeting in. You have Kareem here, for example, saying not having kids is ridiculous. It is the nature of human beings to give birth and raise children. No one can change that rule of nature. On the other hand, you have Milorad here who says the cult of parenthood needs to stop forcing its morality onto everyone else. Now, for folks at home, whether you have kids, whether you want them or not, we want to hear from you. Be sure to tweet us with the hashtag AJStream, and we'll get to those tweets during the show.
So joining us right here in the studio, we have Laura Scott. She's an author and founder and director of the Childless by Choice project. Seated right next to Laura, Harry Siegel is an editor at the New York Daily News. He wrote, "Why the choice to be childless is bad for America." Joining us from Wellington, New Zealand, Lisa Taylor is a child-free advocate, and she and her partner have decided they don't want to have children. And in Kolkata, India, Indrani and Shonak Kar have also opted not to be parents. So welcome, everybody. Great to have you here. Laura, when people ask you about your children, how are your children? How many children do you have? What are the conversations that people literally just come up and have with you?
The assumption is that I do have children, of course.
Yeah.
And I usually say, no children. And I used to just leave it at that. And then I would get that sort of pity look. Oh, it'll happen for you. Oh, you know, just wait a bit. And, you know, they'll sort of pity you for not having children. Yeah. Now, as I matured into my 30s, my answer was, no, I don't have children, and happily by choice. And that really was a great way to start a conversation. Either the conversation ended because they didn't want to talk to someone who didn't have kids, because they didn't find a way to connect with you.
Sure.
Or they would just say, oh, that's interesting, and we would have a conversation from there.
Yeah. Lisa, give us a little sample of things that people say to you about children.
That I'm missing out on having a family, or that I'm just missing out on life with children. And my response to that is, I'm a teacher, so I don't actually miss out.
Yeah. And will they just come up to you and just ask you just that, and they don't know you? I find that incredibly personal. The two things that I don't ask is, when's the baby due? And it's not a good question to ask if you're not sure. And about children, again, if I'm not sure, do people even worry about that when they ask you?
I don't actually think people kind of think about the implications it might have. They don't know the story of why you don't have children, so to assume that someone is going to have children is, I find, quite rude, because you don't know the story behind it. You don't know if they've got fertility problems going on, or anything else kind of in the background that you don't know about. So I find it quite kind of awkward to be asking and be like, well, why do you want to know?
Do you have to have a really thick skin, Lisa? How do you cope with that?
Somewhat of a thick skin, just because most of it does come from family members who probably should know better by now. But yeah, like, just different people. I've had students ask me, why don't you have children? Are you missing out by not having children? Is that weird? But yeah, you just kind of find answers and responses that work for you. So
yeah.
So Femi, we actually asked our online community about the And Johnny, I'll be coming to you actually with this question in just a moment. We put out a question about what stigma do people who choose not to have children face, and we got really interesting stories. We have Bernard over here who says, they refer to me as omosasa, that's a branchless tree that grows in my village. Every time I pass by that tree, I'm hurt. And it gets even worse with people whose relationships with their family are impacted. Take a listen to this video comment from Marsha.
I know the effects. I have people who still, in this day and age, write to me and say, I can't come to Christmas. I'm not invited to any family functions because they see me as a threat to this family in stopping it, in stopping the growth of the family. I have to say that that is very sad. I would hope that the beauty of the child-free lifestyle is given as much respect as to those who choose to raise children.
And Johnny, can you talk to us a little bit about where you think this stigma is motivated? Why is it that people feel like they have to weigh in negatively about this instead of just accepting it as a different choice?
Yeah, well, I think it's all about the patriarchy, the heteronormativity, and people making a law. Like, if you're married, then you're supposed to have children. If you're a woman, you're supposed to love children and feel fulfilled and complete when you give birth. And this entire patriarchal rigid structure of, I think, all societies, more or less, is the reason. And people, women and everyone, I mean family, especially for people like us from this part of the world, it's the central tenet of family values, family culture, where everything boils down to. And when you say family, it is about reproduction, children. And I think the main reason is that people do what everyone is doing, and people do what they're supposed to do, and they don't really have the courage or the guts or the imagination to to do what would really work for their life. And if they see anyone else doing something different, then that's like a threat.
See, Harry, let me bring you into the conversation. You are our minority parent in the conversation. When Omar mentioned the branchless tree, the woman who was referred to as the branchless tree, you went, oh, wow. Why did that shock you?
It's just a terrible thing to say to someone.
Yeah.
And I'm just imagining that this person has made this choice for whatever reason, and there are many different reasons for making that.
Yeah.
Getting that sort of judgment or approbation and feeling so isolated from their community. But if you depersonalize this just a step, so we're talking about child-free, which really sort of connotes people who have made a strong and active decision not to have children. And for a lot of people, it's somewhat circumstantial. Right, so you could say childless, and maybe if the economics were right and the right partner at the right time, maybe they would and maybe they would not. And what we're seeing is that, like across the developed world, the collectively those choices have changed. So the U.S. used to be the one place where a lot of people still had kids, where excluding immigrants and basically in the entire Western world, you still had a replacement level birth rate, and that changed in 2008, right?
Yeah.
Basically, with the Great Recession, it dropped, and now it looks a lot more like Europe and all these other places. And what happens is that if you don't have immigrants, you end up with this bump where women have these different choices, and this is largely about women.
But don't men also have these choices too?
Men absolutely do. But I more often the active person, often the active person in these choices are women who in fact are carrying the babies. And
so,
often
do you
take
agree with that?
control
Because
of
Laura spent a lot of time, Laura spent over a year, and Johnny, hold tight for a moment. Laura spent over a year looking and talking to child-free couples.
I surveyed couples,
Yeah.
so that was my respondents. So I was talking to the man and the woman. And generally, when you're in a couple, it is a joint decision-making process, more often than not. But it is an economic decision. Particularly for the subcategory of child-free persons I call the postponers. These are the people that at some point imagined they would have kids, and then postponed and postponed and maybe set a deadline, and that deadline passed, and then they had a conversation again. So it's not just one choice. You don't wake up as a postponer and go, bam, I'm going to be child-free. It's a series of decisions that you make along a timeline that eventually you come to some agreement as a couple that, you know what, maybe we're okay just remaining child-free. And so some of the postponement, some of the motives for postponement are very much economic. It might be in the US, a lot of it is school debt, frankly. If you're still living in your parents' home and you've got $30,000 of school debt, you're not going to be going off having kids, even if you may have a fiance or a husband or a wife. That decision gets postponed. Postponement often leads to child freedom when the couple comes to a point where they go, you know what, we imagined we would have kids, but you know, we've been living 10 years without them, and everything is fine just the way it is.
So, there are a lot of double standards when it comes to gender between men and women. I'm coming to you in just a bit. There are a lot of double standards, and typically, unsurprisingly, this is another area where people do say that there's a double standard between the way men and women are treated. We have a video comment here from Sezin. Let's listen to what she has to say.
My husband and I both decided years ago that having children wasn't for us, but he doesn't get shamed about it. I get told that I'll regret it, and what will I do when I'm old, and I'll change my mind. And these comments often take on a sinister turn when people start telling me that I will never truly be happy, I will never be fulfilled, and I'll never truly understand love, and I will never be a real woman without having children. And my husband, who made the same choice, is often sitting right next to me while this double standard occurs.
Shaunak, let's start with you. Do people ever say anything to you? Do you feel like the comments that are directed to you are different than the ones directed to Indrani?
Not really, but especially the comments come from the family initially, especially from the in-laws side and from my parents. It's like a trend that people should have a kid after marriage, but generally it's more or less in the same lines. The answer is the same. I mean,
Shaunak, tell us about a former boss that you had and why he decided not to give you a promotion. Tell us that story.
Yeah, actually, this is like 2-3 years back when I was working in a different. I had a boss, wherein he started telling me that while during the promotion year, the appraisal time, he told me that he's not going to give me promotion because only reason being that I decided not to have a kid. So when I asked what is the reason behind it, he said, you're not ready to take the responsibility, back home, then how can you take the responsibility here? So that was his answer. So I was literally shocked that
you were because you didn't have children, he thought you were too responsible to have a promotion. That's kind of stunning.
Exactly.
Wow.
There's a good example
I
globally.
heard the same thing in my last office.
Sure. Indrani, let me bring in Laura, and then you two can talk to each other. Go ahead, Laura.
We have some good examples of that. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and also is it Julia Gillard?
Julia Gillard.
Yes, from Australia.
Yeah.
Both female world leaders that have often had this comment made to them that they're not trustworthy as leaders because they're child-free, childless, so they can't be trusted to make decisions around family policy because they're childless. So there is a sense that because you haven't had the experience of being a parent, you're not capable of leading in that way, which I think is totally uncalled for. And we just have to look at their performance as leaders to know that's not true.
The choice that you are making to have children means they feel that that means that you shrug off from responsibility.
Harry's looking very sheepish here. Harry's sitting here going, that's terrible. I can't believe they said that. That's awful. I'm sorry, Dad, but people were saying this stuff. Go on.
Well, let me say a couple things here, right? Germany, Merkel, right? They have their fertility rate is 1.4, right? So 2 people, you need about 2.1 to keep your population, 1.4. So in addition to being very welcoming right now to refugees and often immigrants.
Is that to do with Germans' refugee policy then? It's because they actually do need children?
They need population. That is part of it, and they have an aging population, and and there are all sorts of programs there. They're actually meant to be parent-friendly, in sort of the opposite experience of where what can you do to make sure the parents can stay in the workforce and stay engaged, and what services and child care can you provide? Because if you don't encourage people to have children, you can't maintain the population. That leads to huge problems. So the most selfish thing parents say, I think, is, oh, who's going to take care of you in your old age? You're breeding your nurse or whatever, which is nuts. But
Yeah.
But socially, in a broader sense, and you see this in Japan, right? There are more people under 65 than 15. By 2050, there are going to be more people over 85 than 15. Japan doesn't like immigrants. Everyone there is Japanese.
These are big sweeping statements.
It's true. You've got the internet right there.
Right.
So you're going to have more people over 85 than 50. And already, there are more adult diaper than baby diaper sales. It's nuts.
Wow.
And so the young people, it has this dramatic effects, these individual decisions people are reasonably making, right? One out of 3 guys between 16 and 19 says they have zero interest in sex. And that's good because 60% of women 16 to 19 say the same. Because if you're looking at this and there's all these old people who want services and want things.
All right, worst case scenario is what? What?
That you have an aging population and it makes young people miserable and unhappy. They have this college debt. There are these old people who expect to get paid off. You don't want to work because you don't want to work into a system you're not going to get paid off in. You're less inclined to be interested in romance, sex, marriage.
7 billion people in the world, Harry. Why are you belly aching about a few less children?
This is the entire Western world. So this is a good thing to have less kids, but if it happens rapidly, like in the course of a couple generations, so you end up with a giant overhang of old people who you must take care of because we're human beings. We're not just going to say off to the tar pits with you. Right? And there's no young people to pay into the stuff they expect in the healthcare and any of that. In the U.S., the federal government spends $7 for people over 65 for every $1 they spend on people under 18.
So old people are going to be a burden. If people continue not to have kids, old people are going to be a burden.
But you know that
it's going to break down the entire social contract, and we've seen it happen in other countries. It's actually a really bad thing.
Well, you know, I don't know that that's true because if we look at high fertility countries, you know, countries in Africa, anywhere there's high fertility, the problem is not aging population. The problem is children not being cared for. Look at the problems associated with high fertility countries. Homeless kids, street kids, kids that are being sexually exploited and work child labor. So, you know, India has over 11 million street kids. How are they contributing to the economy? Well, they are being indentured servants. They are basically slave labor, or they're being sexually exploited. So, you know, you have to, if you want more babies, you have to understand that you have to care for them, and you also have to have jobs for them when they get older. Palestine, for example, there's a lot of situations where we do have large populations of young people and children, but the economies are not thriving because they don't have the infrastructure to care for those children. So this is the problem that we have. Babies do not solve this problem. Babies cannot solve the problem that we have really dysfunctional economic models that just don't stand the test of time.
We may be talking apples and oranges here. We may be talking developing world and developed world.
Sure.
Indrani, can you hold your question for a second? Because I know that Omar's jumping in, and then I promise you I will go straight back to you. Omar, go ahead.
So Harry mentioned earlier that you brought up the word selfish in reference to people who might choose not to have kids. But we have you have somebody here online who's actually turning the tables on this one. Pat says, not having kids can be realistic and smart. Having kids is selfish unless you have the time, the patience, the money, the big family and the friends network, and then having health care for them and a plan. Lisa, can you imagine a scenario in which you can tell somebody who's choosing to have kids that choice is selfish, that they're making it not in the best interest of the kid but for themselves?
I especially see it here with people who are not very well off. I know for myself, I'm still a university student. I have student debt. So for me, like if I was to bring a child into that, that's immediately having more debt put into my life. But then I have friends in the same boat who are totally fine with having children, having student debt. So
Indrani,
it's still like an open thing, yeah.
Indrani, what was your question?
Yeah.
Indrani, go ahead.
My question was like the aging population, the issue of the aging population. I don't know. I felt like it's all, we are talking about being child-free by choice, right? So choice of the individual, of the couple, of that particular family. So the aging population issue seemed to me like I should not be drinking water because the world would face a water crisis. I mean,
Harry?
That's totally right. It is one of the wonderful things that's happened throughout the developed world the men and women can make their own choices about having children, instead of making the frequently selfish and passive choice where there's sex or there's marriage and children just result, that people don't really want or aren't in a position to take care of. If this happens on a large enough scale, you end up with some really unique questions that are not a judgment on any one individual person, but create broader problems.
But Harry, what are you trying to tell our guests who are all child-free? You're saying, well, economically, this is not going to work. We have an older population and they can't be supported. So what are you trying to say then? You think that society will collapse if they don't have kids? Hang on, Indrani, I'm putting Harry on the spot here. This is what you're basically saying, aren't you?
No, straw man. I call straw man. No, I'm saying that if you take the group that chooses to be child-free, if you take modern contraception, people stepping away from sort of religious practices and expectations, being more able to decide when to have kids or if to have kids, that this is a good and healthy thing. That if you have enough urbanization and people moving into first world cities rapidly enough and no one there is having children, if this choice is widespread enough, which is not a judgment on any individual person making that choice, it creates obvious and significant problems. The non-selfish analog to the who's going to take care of you in your old age. If collectively there are all of these old people, and it creates really a dystopian type of society where they get paid out, people our age who are working are never going to get the same payout and have all these reasons not to have finished lives.
This is why you're a dad of two, then?
I have a solution. I have a solution.
Go ahead, Laura.
I think that the real solution here is that everybody has the right to choose what's right for them.
Right.
Because I know I am childless by choice, but I also know I'm not the majority. The majority of people that, if we were to survey everybody in the world, the majority of people, I would say 60%, probably would say, yes, we want to have children. But we want to have children on our terms. We want to determine the number of children and the spacing in between the children. A lot of people in our world do not have that choice. So they don't have access to family planning. They don't have the ability to choose how many and how, the spacing in between. We have too many women dying in childbirth because they're having children too young, they're malnourished. A lot of women in Africa die in childbirth because they are married young. Their bodies are not ready to have children, and the children don't survive.
So Laura and Lisa and Indrani, I'm going to show you an advert on Shonak as well. I'm going to show you an advert. It's in Denmark, where the population of babies being born is way, way, way down. And the government is trying to persuade people, have a baby, have two, for goodness sake. Okay, so this is called Do It for Denmark. Have a look at this.
Book din rejse med vores ægløsningsrabat.
Book your holiday.
Fyr den af.
Get it on.
Bevis du har
And
undfanget et
prove
barn, og
you've
vind
conceived
3
a
års
child
forbrug
to
af
win a 3-year
babyudstyr
supply of
og
baby
en
stuff
børnevenlig ferie.
and a child-friendly holiday.
Oh my.
Men hvad nu, hvis du
But what if you've already
din pligt?
done your duty?
Eller hvis chancerne for
Or what
at
if your
omfavnelse
chance of
ikke er
conceiving a
særlig
child
høje?
isn't so
Så se
high?
på det sådan
Well,
her.
look at it
Det handler
this
ikke
way.
kun om at
It's
vinde.
not just about
Det
winning.
handler om at være med.
All the fun is in the participation.
Deltag i
Participate in the
konkurrencen.
competition. Do it for Denmark. Lisa, child-free Lisa. Would that persuade you, Lisa?
No, it's so awkward. I actually have my mother-in-law who still wants grandchildren from us, so she's kind of pushing kind of things with them.
Right.
Being like, oh, we set it up right, you guys can have a child. And it's like, but that's not where the choice is. It's not with the other family members, it's with us as a couple. So I find that they're really awkward for an advert.
Right.
Like,
So you wouldn't
okay.
do it for New Zealand, she says indelicately.
No.
All right.
No.
Omar, what do you have?
That was really
I can leave you with this thought here from Stephanie, who says, I don't think that making the choice to not have kids is either courageous, but neither is it something to look down upon. It's just an individual's choice.
What's our takeaway, Laura?
I think that's true. I think if we all invite everybody to make the choice that's right for them, the world's not going to, explode on us. I do believe that the population will stabilize. We have to come up with new economic models that support that and honor that. But at the end of the day, it serves everybody to make the choice that's right for them and not, just lose the judgment around it. It's just going to happen, and everybody's going to get what they want, and that's ideally what we want to have.
Laura Scott, Harry Siegel, Lisa Taylor, Indrani, and Shonak Kar. It's been a pleasure talking to you about not having children. We will continue that conversation in a moment at stream.aljazeera.com. See you there. Thanks for watching. Hello again, this is the Streams Online post show. So today there are a growing number of people around the world who are deciding not to have children. And that's what we've been talking about. Harry, in the little break that we had from the main show to the post show, made a really brilliant point. You said that people don't come up to you and say what, Harry?
Well, I've never seen anyone come up to me or any other parent and say, what were you thinking?
You've probably got really nice children.
They're lovely, usually, but sometimes they're terrible. And I can't imagine someone coming up to me and saying that. And I find it very easy from the people I know who have chosen not to have children, who for various reasons outside of choice haven't had children,
now,
and strangers
how
who are...
How did you find that out, though? Did you, because you're close friends, you found that out? How do you find that out about your friends? That they decided that they're not going to have children.
Well, that was the start of this article. Is my friend Tiffany was saying, oh, congratulations, right after I had my first child, and she laughed and said, I'm never going to do that, let me tell you. And then went on. So she was the exception to this rule. She said, your child is beautiful, and then she spent an hour explaining why having children was the worst possible idea, was life ruinous. Very nicely. It wasn't mean. It's like, you're never going to travel again. Say goodbye to money and fun, and the great thing about other people's children is you can play with them and then give them back to their parents.
Right.
So there was there was an article that came out last year that was really controversial. It was a lot of backlash. I have it here on my screen. I look down on young women with husbands and kids, and I am not sorry. I mean, just you can tell from the title why it generated the controversy, but here are a couple of quotes from it. The author says, having kids and getting married, these aren't compliments, they are actually super easy accomplishments, rather. They are super easy tasks, literally anyone can do them. Women will be equal with men when we stop demanding that it be considered equally important to do housework as real work. So she's calling housework not real work, and goes on to say, you will never have the time, energy, freedom, or mobility to be exceptional if you have a husband and kids, what we were just talking about. Now, a couple of the reactions that we saw to this piece, we have Betty here who says, I am child-free by choice, but I've managed not to be arrogant and judgmental about it. This chica needs to get over herself. And then you have Meg here who says, my career in the military, my husband and my children have made me extraordinary. I love my family and I feel fulfilled and happy. I was once single and traveling Europe. This article is simply one woman's foolish opinion about something she actually knows nothing about. And in a sense, that might be the crux of the problem, is that people can't live both lives and then look back and figure out which one is better. So it's really a lot of speculation about a life choice that nobody ever made, right?
And I think it's also a clash of values, too. So, if you don't share my values around children, then maybe you must be evil. And so there is a little bit of a clash of values going on. There's also, a movement in the millennial women that I coach. I coach MBA students. And so a lot of them are, they're saying, I really want to make an impact on the world. I want to have an impact not just on my 1 or 2 biological children. I want to have an impact that extends beyond that. So they want to balance that. Maybe they do want children, but before they want children, they want to feel like they're doing meaningful work. And sometimes when you're with your 3-year-old and you're cleaning up spaghetti off the floor, it doesn't feel like meaningful work to you.
Right. And let me just hold that thought for a moment. Let me just bring in Indrani. Indrani, what were you saying? Go ahead.
I was saying that it's all about figuring out what your aim in life is. Like, my aim I could, teach poor children, and it's not that if I'm child-free by choice, it's not that I hate children. My aim in life might be to teach 100 poor children, and I might feel fulfilled when they, pass the school examination. I mean, that is how I can be fulfilled, and it is very wrong for,
And Johnny, what do you say to people who ask you why you don't have children yet? Is there a plan?
Yes.
Do you think you might change your mind?
No.
Okay.
No.
What do you say to them?
Well, usually it's family, colleagues, also everyone else, because we are 9 years married, and the first question would be, when is the good news? When are you going to see me? Indrani? And so my first response is, that might be good news for you. That's like the disastrous news for me. And so that's my first response. Usually what happens is these family members will be like, after your life.
Wow.
How can you not want children? Who's going to look after you? How can it's a different feeling when your child says "ma," and You would never get that happiness out of anything. So usually my answer to, my aunts, even some grandparents, I usually tell them that I'll become a mother when you become a stripper. I'm saying that to an Indian grandparent. Okay.
Oh my goodness! Did you give that Indian grandparent a heart attack, Indrani?
Yeah, almost. So this person is like, how can you talk to me like that? And how could you? Exactly. Like, is your aim in life to be a stripper? I'm not demeaning the strippers, but what I'm saying is that
this is the shock tactic. Hold tight a minute, Andrani, because Shonak is sitting there very, 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 very quiet. Shonak, do you not actually want to be a dad ever? Indrani, you're not allowed to answer him.
No, I agree with my wife.
Yeah.
I just not. I agree.
Never? You don't want a little Shonak running around, a little Indrani? Can you imagine what that would be like?
No.
Maybe this might be the real answer. All right, everybody.
Why don't we believe him? Why don't we believe him? And why don't we? Why don't we believe Indrani when they say that?
Yes.
And this is what really is weird about this.
Yeah.
Is that when you say no, I don't want children. I'll never want children. I don't regret it.
Yeah.
They go, we don't believe you.
Yeah.
You must be lying.
Mm-hmm.
This can't be true.
Yeah.
And even though there's many studies, there's a very good Norwegian study that followed people to end of life, really late in life, who were child-free, and said, do you regret it? And they all said, no, we're perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And everybody didn't want to believe that because it's like they can't believe it because, oh my gosh, we've been told all our lives that if you don't have children, you're going to regret it, you're going to die alone with 10 cats, and then nobody's going to find you for 3 days.
But there are people online who are basically suggesting that you might be missing out on something. We have Ellen here who tweeted in saying, it's not inherently selfish not to have kids, but that childless rarely connect to future generations and they lose the lessons that kids teach. Lisa, I want to toss this one to you. You hear a lot about
to change diapers in the middle of the night.
Yeah, right. So, you hear that a lot, that a lot of people say, I would not have learned about Facebook had it not been for my grandkids or things like that. Do you feel like you might lose out on connecting with younger generations because you're choosing not to have children?
No, because I'm a teacher. So because of teaching, I'm surrounded by children and adults anyway. And also we, as role models, also work with our grandparents and parents for things like Facebook as well. I have younger siblings, so who have said that they want children, so there'll probably be grandchildren one day, who knows, but that's their choice for them to make when they're, a little bit older.
My answer to that would be, you have to connect to yourself first, then the next generation.
Yeah.
If you connect to yourself and you find that you're not made to be a parent, you don't want that, then there's no point having a kid because you want to connect to the next generation.
Let me show you something here on my laptop. This is a book by Laura, and it says 2 is enough, a couple's guide to living childless by choice. Laura, why do you feel like you need to guide people in living child-free?
It's a tough thing to navigate because it's so exceptional in certain communities. If you're living in New York and Manhattan and you're sitting in a hookah bar, you're going to find some childless by choice people. But if you are in Canton, Ohio, or if you're in some little small town in the Southwest Virginia where I spent 20 years, it's hard to find peers. And believe me, I had a hard time until I outed myself as child-free by choice, and I wrote the book. I had no idea I was surrounded by child-free people. They started coming out of the woodwork eventually. But it can be very socially isolating, and it's tough to sort of navigate all of the stigma we've been talking about today. It's tough to answer all the questions that are being asked. And it's also tough to understand that, it's possible to have a beautiful, purposeful, and meaningful life as a child-free person. We know that, but people don't believe it, and they question us, and they second-guess us, and they tell us that's not true. And sometimes we do feel like, really, is that true? That's one of the reasons I wrote the book. I wanted to be sure that I wasn't making a grave mistake by making this choice.
But what about for people who, the people who call you a branchless tree, and the people who say, I need grandchildren, all of that stuff? What advice do you want to give to the people out there who do have children, who do expect other couples and other singles to have children? What's the one thing that you want to say to them other than butt out?
I do want to say that, you know, you be supportive of people's choices, and reproductive decision making is a very personal choice, as you said. But also just say, you know, good for you. I'm so, you know, happy for you that you're a parent, and this is a joyful thing for you. And not have any judgment around that. There are people that are judging on both sides of this fence. So I try to take the judgment out of the conversation. Just take the judgment out of the conversation and just say, you know, I'm happy, you know, and I, as a coach, I don't have an opinion. I do reproductive decision coaching, and I say, I have no skin in the game. I want what you want for you. And I have that with all my executive clients and all my reproductive decision-making clients. It's not about me, it's about your happiness and what turns your crank and what makes you happy.
All right. Omar.
I will leave you with this interesting comment here, a video comment that we got. Basically, this is how Anita handles people who do ask her why she doesn't have kids. It's actually pretty funny. Listen to this.
I learned to use humor. Telling people that I don't have children because I would have eaten them is a very effective tool for stopping invasive and frankly inappropriate questions, often from people I have only just met. But I now, in middle age, when it's less troubling, I use humor to get people to talk about why they presume and assume that, culturally speaking, a woman should identify as someone who naturally wants to have children.
She would have eaten them.
All right. Okay. Quick question for Harry. Have you travelled since you had children?
Much less.
Harry and Laura and Lisa, Indrani and Shonat, thank you very much for talking about something incredibly personally in a very public forum. I really appreciate your candour. Thanks for joining us on today's edition of The Stream. Take care, everybody.